Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 4th of January 2012. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with talks for future shows. The game in the background is Space Marine Exterminatus mode, which, it's alright. I mean, it's not amazing. Honestly, when it was put in, I wasn't really all that concerned about it, because as much as I would have liked a proper co-op mode through the actual game, which is what was initially promised long back in the midst of time when the game was more of a third-person hack-and-slash RPG kind of thing, it isn't. It's just a bunch of arenas, so it's alright for passing the time, but it's not all that impressive. But I suppose it's a free update, so you can't really complain all that much. I will, though. I will complain all that much. Alright, first email actually comes in from an unusual source. Now, you might recall that it was either yesterday or the day before, I can't even recall it, that we discussed the topic of refunds for digital products. Now, I actually did have someone come and respond on this one from a publisher, and I was hoping to hear from one of them. And this is a fellow from Paradox. You should probably know who Paradox are by now. If you don't, they're the guys who publish Magicka. They also publish a lot of PC games, including a lot of Grand Strategy and things like that. And this comes in from one of their staff here, and he's given me permission to read this out verbatim, which is exactly what I do, because I don't like misquoting people or quoting people out of context or anything along those lines. So this is just going to be a point of view from a staff member over at Paradox, so let's start off. He says, "Hi, TB. First of all, I'd like to clarify why I decided to drop you a line. I think the whole topic is important, and there are a lot of misconceptions and wrong assumptions about what goes on behind the scenes. I'm a big fan of transparency, and as a gamer myself, I often find myself perplexed and frustrated by the lack of communication from developers and publishers." Daniel, on the 2nd of January's mailbox, there you go, apparently it was the 2nd. God, I couldn't even remember. It all sort of mushes together these days. Brought up a really good example, and I'd like to highlight a couple of my own experiences as a gamer and as a producer at a PC publisher by the name of Paradox Interactive of these kinds of problems and how they relate to Daniel's question. Okay, so the first example is Call of Duty Black Ops, and that was more or less unplayable for me and most of the people I know with dual-core PCs, and remained so for a couple of months if I remember correctly. Dying to play the game, I naturally contacted Activision support and didn't get a response. I then visited the Steam, Treyarch, and Activision forums, and let's just say I've never experienced so much concentrated hate and vitriol on a forum before. What made matters worse was that the only official communication from the devs and publisher was the press releases telling us Blops was the largest and greatest success since the Big Bang, basically, and the console seemed to be enjoying the game immensely. Even the community manager didn't acknowledge the widespread PC problems for days after the release on Twitter. I just double-checked that. All in all, it was a frustrating time for myself and many in my situation. Batman Arkham City. I loved the game to bits and had played it for 34 hours and had like 80% completion when my save file mysteriously vanished, courtesy of Games for Windows Live. Again, I go through the motions and lo and behold, others are having the same problem. As far as I could tell, Warner Brothers and the excellent devs over at Rocksteady were dead silent on the issue. Additionally, considering the less than satisfactory manner in which the DirectX 11 problems were handled, I resigned to the fact that I'd probably never play any more Arkham City, let alone buy that DLC I'd been eyeing up during the Steam sale. Together with the Assassin's Creed 2 problem Daniel described, these are serious issues. So to the question, what part does the dev and publisher and Steam or any digital outlet play in this, and who's accountable or responsible for what? The topic becomes tricky, and not a lot of people want to talk details because it all comes down to a much dreaded word: refunds. NDAs are in place to prevent such information slipping out. But basically, any dev, indie or not, or publisher that releases a game on Steam or any digital platform has a working and business relationship with Steam. As a result, any bad release has consequences on said relationship. Just like in any business relationship, the worse you do in upholding your end of the bargain, the more consequences there are. That's not to say that Steam will kick out Activision or Paradox for one botched release, but it affects the working relationship. Good sales are good sales, after all. Quality assurance is the responsibility of the dev and the publisher. Steam can't quality test more than just making sure their games start and run the Steam API in an acceptable manner. Thus, what becomes more important is not that the game was bad on release. As gamers, PC especially, we know that bugs are unfortunately a part of that equation, but rather how the developer and publisher handles the bad release. This relates to what I said earlier about how you talk to your gamers, fans, and customers once the game is out. Personally, I find it a much greater sin that you are non-communicative after a bad release, rather than actually releasing a product that performs less than satisfactory. Like you said yourself, there could have been a myriad of problems preventing Daniel from accessing Assassin's Creed 2, many of them fully acceptable and reasonable. But when the publisher doesn't even acknowledge said problems, that's when the speculation and vitriol starts. A wise man once said, "No communication is the path to the dark side. No communication leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to a lot of pissed off gamers." Having been the lead producer on Magicka, a game not exactly known for being, shall we say, a fine piece of engineering work, I'm familiar with less than stellar launches, but I tried to learn from the mistakes made with Black Ops and do right by our Magicka players, and made sure we communicated as much as possible on Twitter, Facebook, the Steam forums, and our own, and were frank and apologetic about the problems and promised to work hard to sort them out. It's the decent thing to do as a publisher and a developer, and Steam were thankful for the support we showed the game. Gamers are an opinionated bunch, and we don't always hold back when we should. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you're right, but it's important to actually talk to each other and see if that problem that is bugging you is really X's fault or if Y is to blame, but you need two parties to have a conversation. Why weren't the fine devs over at Treyarch, Rocksteady, or any good dev with a broken release more communicative? There are two possible reasons. A, they don't care, or B, they were told not to. The first alternative is preposterous, so that leaves us with the latter alternative. And there's not much to say about that, more than it's a damn shame some companies have developed such a Skynet-like personality, where they can't even talk to their fans and customers like actual human beings when they need it the most. Gamers should make their voices heard and, more importantly, vote with their wallets and demonstrate what kind of behavior is acceptable and what is not from devs and publishers. Hopefully this clears up some of the questions and sheds some light on the situation from the perspective of the other side. Well, it does to some degree. There are a lot of questions I still have. I mean, that doesn't really answer the idea of refunds. Because if I were to go by the UK standard of things, then it once again goes back to the chain of supply, as in, as a consumer, I go back to the retailer, and then the retailer goes back to the publisher, usually via the distributor. The problem I've got with that is saying that, hey, you know, Steam basically doesn't test anything, and shops don't test games either. They shouldn't necessarily have to do that, but with a shop it's absolutely impractical to do so. You're talking about testing PC games in a shop, that can't be done, you don't have a PC. Also, you can't test all of the copies that come in. I think it's actually not that unreasonable for Steam to have to test its games, particularly, I might add, when Steam is quite picky about the games it actually lets on its service. It repeatedly turns down a lot of developers and says, well, it's just not a good fit for the service. So are you really telling me that Steam can't at least playtest a little bit? And the fact that the whole ATI thing got through for Rage is absolutely unacceptable. I don't think it's really necessarily right to put all of the responsibility in the hands of Steam and say, oh, you've got to test something that goes on your service, but it would be nice if they did. And especially if you're telling me that basically all the testing they do is incredibly bare bones. Does it start, and does it have Steam API? That's all they really care about. Well, unfortunately for Steam, Steam has put itself in a position where it has not entirely a monopoly, but it's getting close. It has a massive market share, as in no other distributor can really compete with Steam right now, to the point where people demand games be on Steam, otherwise they won't purchase them. So to me, because you have that market position, because you are in a privileged position, I feel that you have a greater responsibility, honestly. And as a digital platform, as opposed to a brick-and-mortar store, you are also in a position to test more. You're also in a position to actually hold developers to account more. But here's the thing, I don't think Steam would do that. What would happen if Steam had actually tested Rage a couple of days beforehand and said, this doesn't work in ATI cards, guys? Do you really think that it would have fixed it by then? Probably not. They would have fixed it eventually, but it wouldn't have been fixed in that time, certainly. So what do? Do they take it down and make sure they don't sell it? Because then, one, that kind of hurts the PC market, because the major retailer that's supposed to be selling this game isn't selling it. So it makes it more likely that people either pick it up on consoles or just not bother buying it entirely, which hurts the overall market in general, which Steam is pretty much reliant on. You know, if the PC gaming market imploded, then Steam would be basically worthless. But you've also got to consider that a lot of people will go to competitors. In fact, some of us had to for various games, including Space Marine. Space Marine was not available in the UK. Brink was not available in the UK for whatever dumb reason. I think we've figured out something along the lines that Game and Game Station, the game stores group conglomerate, were responsible for having some of these games taken off Steam via market pressure through some kind of arrangement due to pre-order bonuses or some other nonsense along those lines. I don't know the specifics, but I honestly think that regardless of that, Steam actually does have a bit of responsibility there. At the end of the day, they are the go-to place for games, and they are in a position to actually force developers and publishers to play their role and actually release a proper product. But that's not happening. And gamers in general don't really have that kind of power. It's too difficult to organize gamers into a boycott. Boycotts tend to fail. They are fragmented. They have different opinions. If you have a major retailer say, oi, quit it, then that's cool. And I suppose that goes back to what you just mentioned there about the idea that it harms the working relationship. I have to wonder how much, though. Well, as you said before, they're not certainly going to stop stocking Activision products. So if Activision releases the latest Modern Warfare, Steam is not going to refuse to have that on their service. That's absolutely not going to happen, is it? It doesn't matter how much they dick over PC users, which they have frequently, over and over again, in fact. It doesn't matter. Steam's going to sell it for the price that they are given to anyway, which will be £40 or $60 or whatever. So I don't know. It would be nice for Steam to actually be accountable in that respect, and also they have to understand that in the long term, it's gonna hurt the PC market more if these releases keep going onto the shelves, and Steam has more clout than we do. We can protest all we please about broken releases, but how do we know what release is broken and what isn't, particularly when there are review embargoes and all sorts of things? People want to buy games on release, and there are incentives in order to do so, and it's going to be difficult to actually break that culture there. And if you do, then what happens? Do we just have the developers and publishers turn around and say, well, we're not going to bother with PC releases, you guys don't buy them on release, you just buy them later down the line? It's a horrible balance. It really is, to strike between these various groups. We need them all to make gaming successful, but all of them have their own foibles and problems, and every group certainly has done things wrong in the past and continues to do things wrong to this very day. And God, I just wish it was easier. All we want to do is play video games. Why is it so hard? Well, that took somewhat longer than expected, honestly. Good lord. Okay, I've got time for one quick question, since that one did drag on somewhat. Anyway, this one's a bit controversial. It comes in from Oliver R. that says this: in your mailbox of January 3rd, you specifically thanked a YouTuber for not campaigning whilst you were on the King of the Web. I find this hugely ironic, as you yourself campaigned during another YouTuber's run. This is not what irony means, bro. I personally feel that either all the YouTube community should stick together on this, or none of them. Also, in the mailbox on January 3rd, you said you would currently be voting for somebody, and I think this is a territory that YouTubers as big as yourself should stay away from, as many of the subscribers will be swayed to vote for this person too. My question for you is this: do you think it's fair that the King of the Web contest isn't about the standard of content, but rather the size of his or her viewers? Also, do you think that YouTubers should remain impartial on the subject? There is so much wrong with this email I can't even begin, but I'm going to anyway, because that's how it works. Right, firstly, there is no YouTube community. Yeah, there you go, I said it. There is no YouTube community. Do you think I feel any obligation to PBAT whatsoever, for instance? No, he doesn't work for the same company I do, for one thing. If he worked for the same company as I did, I may feel some kind of obligation. Or if I watched his videos, I may feel some kind of obligation. I have nothing against the guy. In fact, as I said, I gave him that $500 gift card just as a gift, just to say, hey, thanks for running, it was cool, you know? Just because I could. But do you really think that I feel anything else? Do you think I feel guilty for that guy? No, I don't. We flattened him. And? What's the point? This is a popularity contest. Here's what you have to understand about King of the Web. And indeed any contest that involves voting and campaigning. It's all a popularity contest. Every single last bit of it. It is impossible for it to be anything else. For God's sake, the elections, real elections, political elections, can boil down to popularity contests. In real elections, your allies and influence are extremely important. Whoever's endorsed you, whoever's allied and campaigning for you, that's vitally important. So if I have strong allies in an election, then I've got a bigger chance of winning. If I have a larger viewer base of people willing to vote for me, I have a bigger chance of winning in exactly the same way that any other election works. But let's throw this out of the window right now and say that there is no YouTube community. I do not feel bound to other YouTube gaming partners. They are my competition. People who are watching them are not necessarily watching me because they don't have the time to. We are all competing for other people's time, and we are competing for ad revenue. People that work for other companies, such as Machinima, which is the other really big one, aside from The Game Station, who I am partnered under, these guys I don't feel any love for. I don't see why I would, honestly. I express thanks to one of them because he deliberately didn't run in order to not interfere with the charity run. Now, that guy's got more subs than me. I still think we could beat him because I think we campaign better, but whatever the case, it made it a little bit easier in order to actually drive through and win. But aside from that, I don't watch his material. I don't know the guy. I'm sure he's awesome. He seems to be, from what I can tell, but do you think I feel any obligation to that guy? No, I don't feel any obligation to that guy, as much as I didn't feel any obligation to Paperback VG either. We are not all a big happy family. In fact, I look down on a lot of them and say, your content's pretty terrible. And yeah, this is going to upset people, as last time. You know what, last time, when I criticised people that did nothing but Let's Plays? Yeah, it upset people, and it's going to upset people now, as it always does. The fact of the matter is, there are different standards that people adhere to. Some people don't have any standards. They just upload what they can in order to make as much money as possible. Welcome to the reality of YouTube Gaming Partnership. There are a lot of people that get YouTube Gaming Partnership and then they shill out as many videos as they can in order to make as much money as possible. And generally speaking, they'll do so with the hot button in mind. Now, when it comes to people like Paperbat or Captain Sparkles, those people do not qualify under that definition. For what I've seen of their content, which is not a huge amount, they tend to pay a lot of care and attention, but there are an awful lot more partners who basically suck and exploit the medium and the games that they're playing for as much money as humanly possible. Now, don't get me wrong, we all do it for the money. We do it to get paid. It's as simple as that. It's our job. Of course we do it to get paid. What else would we do it for? Sure, we love it, and a lot of us have passion for it, but it's still a job, and if we weren't getting paid for it, chances are we wouldn't be working on it as hard as we are. How would we? We'd have to get a real job, as some people like to say. I don't know what a real job is. I think I did real jobs for 6 years, and you know what? They weren't all that fun, so I think I'll just take the imaginary job instead, thank you very much. You talk about quality, and we're talking about the standard of content. Welcome to the internet. Nobody cares. It's as simple as that. Nobody cares about the standard of content. When it comes down to a contest like this, it represents a lot of things that are wrong with the internet, in that you can basically drive a cult of personality to force through whatever point of view you so desire. In this case, it would be winning a contest, which we did by a landslide. And that's how we did it. I campaigned, and I won it. Did I do it because of the quality of my content? Probably not. I'd say that Lindsay, for instance, has better quality content than I do. It's not really comparable, but it takes a hell of a lot more talent to do what she does, as opposed to do what I do. Now, I used to be a musician a long time ago. I was very good at it. I'm actually diploma level in classical oboe, if you can believe that. But after a series of events, I ended up giving it up at the age of 21, and I haven't played it since. Unfortunately, I now can't play it anymore. So I understand just how much effort and practice and time it goes into actually being that damn good at an instrument. Not to mention the idea that you can also coordinate a dance while playing that perfectly. That takes a lot of talent. That girl is more talented than I am. It's really as simple as that. But if we were to go head-to-head, I would win. Why? Because, again, I've got the size, I've got the cult of personality, I've got the number of supporters that other candidates simply do not have. The fact of the matter is, King of Web is a popularity contest, and it also comes down to who campaigns the most effectively and who is able to rally his supporters the most effectively. Which, in the previous case, was us. Is that fair? It's about as fair as it's going to get. How do you suggest it be fair? The only way you can make it fair is by having a panel of judges as opposed to a popular vote. A popular vote will never be inherently fair, but it will also always be inherently fair, because it is a representation of what the majority want, and that's about as fair as you get. Sadly, that's a very unfair thing, as many of you have probably figured out through the course of your lives, and if you haven't by now, you will figure it out sometime later. Democracy is about as fair as unfair gets. Think on that. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox, and I will see you next time.